Yes, Guyana to the world.
Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that is taken aside, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation's building.
She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana, with wonderful people all over this country.
Globespan believes every Guyanese voice is part of the nation's building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. As the world turns on its axis bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
With many flavor, 6 different people blended together. Raise your flag high in unity, we're family with one destiny. Raise your flag high in unity.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Globespan Television here in New York. Tonight we have 2 guests here. Dr. David Hines from the Working People's Alliance Party, and he's a presidential candidate. And we have Mr. Michael Carrington. He's an executive member, former member of parliament, and vice chair for the AFC. We were supposed to have Mr. Kian Jabur from ANOG, but he had an accident last night and he's recuperating in hospital. So we wished him a speedy recovery there. This program is being made available by Mr. Noor Singh and by our 2 technical directors, Mr. Devin Bissoon and Mr. Ryan Gorbin. Now, tonight's topic is the role and importance of third parties in Guyana in the upcoming elections. But before we get there, I want to let you all know that the views expressed by our guests tonight are solely theirs and not those of the staff or management of Globespan Television. And we are a fair and balanced network, can be heard on YouTube and Facebook. So tonight, I'm about to welcome our first guest, Mr. Dr. David Hines. Dr. Hines, welcome to the program. You're on mute, I think. Dr. Hines, you're on mute. Dr. Hines? Dr. Hines, I think you're on mute.
Yes, his mic is muted.
Your mic is muted, Dr. Hines. Dr. Hines, your microphone is on mute. Devin, can you get to Dr. Hines, please?
Sure.
Hello? You're hearing me
Hi,
now?
yes, Dr. Hines. I'm hearing you now. You're
Right,
hearing
sorry
me?
about that. Yeah,
So welcome to the program. Good night and welcome to the program.
thank you.
Dr. Hines, my first question is to you. What do you think of the upcoming elections in Guyana?
But I think it's a very important election. It's the first election since the debacle of 2020. And I said debacle because the 2020 election was a disaster. There were charges of malpractice by both of the major contestants. And the results of the elections were delayed for 5 months because there was a recount. Often people say, the elections were delayed without saying they were delayed because there was a recount. And a recount is not a normal thing in election. You usually have recounts after the results were announced. But in this instance, you had a recount before the elections, results were announced, and all kinds of stuff came up from the recount that really does not bode well for elections. So this coming election will be a test as to whether we have learned from 2020 or we are going to go down the same road as we did in 2020. You see, both sides, as I said, made accusations. And my view is if both sides are making accusations, both sides are charging that there were attempts at malpractice or there was actual malpractice, then GCOM has a responsibility to take into consideration the charges by both sides and to fix the system. And so that we have a better election in 2020. So this elections in 2020 would be a test as to whether once and for all—
You mean in 2025?
2025, whether once and for all we can have elections where all sides are comfortable with the outcome. And for that to happen, all sides have to be comfortable with the rules. And as you know, Dr. Rose, the opposition are calling for biometrics, a new voters list, an impartial GCOM machinery. The PPP / the government, they're pushing back against those calls. So there is an impasse right now. And so we don't know what is going to happen yet. But I am hoping that we can have those requirements met and that all parties go into the election feeling satisfied with the rules. That is the only way that we are going to get an outcome where all sides would accept.
Okay, there are pending charges against the former CEO, Mr. Lowenfield, the former head for the Region 4, the chair or whatever it is, Mr. Mingo, and Walter Lawrence, among others. I'm not asking you to comment on the case, but do you think those charges are going to be resolved before the next election?
At the rate at which they're going, I am not sure that they would.
Okay. So let me turn to you and the WPA. The WPA has been a powerful party in the 70s, late 70s, 80s. Well, late 70s, before Rodney's death in 1980. And since Rodney's death, the WPA it became a splinter group. But my first question to you on this issue, why there's not a particular leader in the WPA? What model has the WPA attempted to have when it have a number of people called leaders? I know Rodney co-opted the party and he seemed to be the leader at the time. But why there's no one leader in the WPA?
I will come to that, Dr. Rose. I want to make a couple of comments.
Okay,
one, you said that the WPA splintered after Rodney's death. That is absolutely untrue. The WPA became strong after Rodney's death. At the time of Rodney's death, the WPA had just become a political party in July of 1979. We didn't have party structures. We just had a leadership because we weren't hoping to become a political party, but the events of 1979 forced on us forced us to become a political party. So when Rodney died, we didn't have a proper party. We developed a proper party after Rodney died. I am saying that because I was part of that process. So the normal thing, people say, well, the WPA dead after. It's not true. The WPA became a stronger party after Rodney's death. It became a proper party after Rodney's death. When Rodney died, we were still a party in name only. We were really a pressure group. We were only a party in name. That happened. The real party came into being after Rodney died. So there is this notion in people repeat things over and over, and they come to believe it without talking to those who were part of the process. Now look, when Rodney died, it was a blow to the anti-dictatorial struggle. When you remove a major leader, the struggle takes a hit. And that is what happened. The struggle was slowed down. It took us another 12 years before the removal of the government at that time that we were trying to remove. Some people argue that had Rodney lived, we would have probably removed the government earlier, but what Rodney's death had an impact on the pace of the struggle. But Rodney's death led to strengthening of the WPA. I just want to make that clear once and for all. All right. No, the WPA came out of what we call the New Left of the 1960s and 70s. Right. And the New Left had an attitude to conventional leadership. We felt that conventional leadership, one-man leadership, was against the spirit of a democratic order. And so a lot of the New Left parties, of which the WPA was a part, opted for collective leadership. We started out first with what you call a rotating leadership. Rodney was never elected or appointed the leader of the WPA. Rodney was the leader of the movement, and people, of course, conferred on him the leadership of the WPA. But inside of the WPA, he was not the leader. I want to make that abundantly clear. The WPA had rotating leadership, and that was later changed after Rodney's death to co-leadership. We started off with two co-leaders, and then we had 4 co-leaders, and now we have 3 co-leaders. So we have always embraced a collective leadership model rather than a single leader. But the society has always identified one person who they see as the leader. But inside of the party structures, we never had a single leader.
Now, you said Rodney would have the WPA would have probably replaced the existing government, which was the PNC government. How would have done that?
No, I never said that. I never said it would have replaced. I said it took us 12 years after Rodney's murder for us to remove the PNC via elections. Okay. And some people have argued that had Rodney lived, the PNC may have fallen earlier. We can't know that. That's conjecture. So that's what I said. I never said we were replaced.
I got you. Mm. So the WPA now, you're the presidential candidate, and I'm sure you've been elected to be the presidential candidate or selected to be the presidential candidate. I don't know which is which, but who is your prime ministerial candidate?
No, we have not gotten to the point of a prime ministerial candidate yet. We recognize that, look, we live in a society that, as much as I said the New Left sought to bring in a new political culture, where we move away from the one-person leadership, one-man leadership, to more collective leadership. Clearly, the society has not moved in that direction, and the society recognizes the one-man leader, the first among equals. And so what the WPA has done is that we try to remain true to our belief in a collective leadership, hence 3 co-leaders, myself, Takumo Gunse, and Rohit Kanai. But recognizing that the society still places store on the individual leader, the party has decided to appoint me as the presidential candidate. So in a sense, it's a balancing of our traditional fidelity to a collective leadership while recognizing that the society recognizes the individual leader. So in naming a presidential candidate and the co-leadership, we seek to balance those two tendencies in our political culture.
Let me ask you this question. Whom do you favor to be your running mate, prime ministerial candidate? An Amerindian, male or female, an Indian, male or female, a black male or female, or do you have any more of those insights?
No, we are not, but we have always subscribed to the fact that if the top spot goes to somebody of one ethnic group, then the second spot has to go to someone of another ethnic group. So if the WP, and I'm sure that we will follow that rubric, then the prime ministerial candidate will have to come from someone who is of another ethnic group, Indo-Guyanese, Amerindian, Portuguese, as the case may be. But we have not gotten to that point yet, because as we have said, our first resort is to go into an election as part of an all-opposition coalition. And our last resort is to go alone. So at the moment, we are putting in a lot of work in trying to develop an all-opposition coalition. But if that does not occur, then we will have to go alone, and we will then have to address our minds to a running mate.
Let me ask you this question. You said the WPA came out from the New Left movement. Now, why you have to follow the trend of the PNC and the PP to have a person of a different race to be the prime ministerial candidate?
No, we are not following the PNC or anyone. That is a cardinal principle in the WPA from the time of our birth. We had four founding leaders of the party: Iyusi Guyana of Askria, Moses Bagwan of Ypres, Clive Thomas of Ratoon, and then for a brief moment, Brindley Ben of the Working People's Vanguard Party. Brindley Ben left shortly after the formation of the WPA as a pressure group in 1974. And Walter Rodney, Rupert Rupnarayan, and Dai and others came into the party after then. And we have always held to the principle of multi-ethnic co-leadership. After Rodney died, we had four co-leaders: Rupert Rupnarayan, Iyusi Guyana, Moses Bagwan, and Clive Thomas, 2 Indians, 2 Africans. When we contested the election, the first time we contested an election in 1985, our prime ministerial candidate was Iyusi Guyana. Our prime ministerial candidate was Rupert Rupnarayan. In 1992, we contested on our own again. Our prime ministerial candidate was Clive Thomas. Our presidential candidate was Clive Thomas, and our prime ministerial candidate was Rupert Rupnarayan. So we are not following anybody. That has always been a tradition in the WPA.
Okay, you're a student of politics, Dr. Thomas. I'm asking you to classify the parties in Guyana. The PP is whatever party: a conservative, a liberal, a socialist. What is the PP in your view?
Well, Guyana is a strange place, you know. Up until recently, in the age of ideology in the 60s and the 70s, the 80s, the 3 major parties in Guyana at the time were all left-wing. You had the PPP, who called itself communist. The PNC said it was Marxist-Leninist, and the WPA said it was independent Marxist. The only place in the world where the 3 major parties were all of, during the Cold War, were all of left-wing persuasion. And I remember in 1983, when the Americans invaded Grenada, the WPA, the PNC, and the PPP were in front of the American embassy um, um, demonstrating. The only thing that the three parties agreed on was the overthrowing of a left-wing government in Grenada. Since then, ideology has waned. The end of the Cold War, I think, marked the end of that ideological contestation. And if you look across the Caribbean, what you see is that whereas in Jamaica, you had the PNP, which was left of center, the JLP right of center. In Barbados, the DLP was left of center, the BLP was right of center. Today, you can't distinguish who's left and who's right because of the waning of ideology as an identity in Caribbean politics. And so therefore, you come to Guyana, the PPP just removed Marxism-Leninism from its constitution. I mean, the PPP was perhaps the most orthodox Marxist left-wing organization, political party in the English-speaking Caribbean. And today it has removed Marxism, Leninism. So it is very difficult to say ideologically where the parties stand. I'm sure there are old-timers in the PPP like the Rohis and the Ramatars who are still Marxists. But you can't look at the Jack Dios and Orphan Ali and say they're Marxists. I don't know what they are. But in terms of the policy, the government is following a more orthodox capitalist neoliberal approach to policy. Whether as individuals they are Marxists and left-wing, I don't know. I know that people like Ramatar and Rohi and so on, because of what they write, you can tell that they still embrace Marxism. But the younger ones like Jack Dio and them, I don't think they have any ideological grounding. But their policies are certainly pro-capitalist.
What about the PNC? What do you think the PNC, the leader Norton, embraces? Whatever ideology.
Again, people like Norton come out of the YSM, which was in the old days to the left of the PNC, quite more radical than the PNC. But again, remember Burnham died, Hoyt took over, and Hoyt began to roll back that old left-wing ideological thing. By the time the PNC left office in 1992, they were no longer Marxist-Leninists, as they said they were. And today, like all the other parties, including the WPA, there is no identification of the party in an ideological sense. We in the WPA, and so I'm saying that like the PNC, the PPP, like the PPP, the PNC does not have any kind of ideological identification. I am sure that there are people in the leadership of the PNC who still identify with left-wing cause. People prefer these days to use the term progressive rather than Marxist, Leninist, and left-wing and so on. So I would say somebody like Norton would fall on the kind of progressive kind of strand. And I'm just hesitating because I am not sure, because people don't identify themselves these days ideologically, and the parties don't also.
What do you think of the AFC?
Well, the AFC arose as a 21st century reincarnation of the UF. You see, third parties are very difficult in an environment in Guyana. Guyana is a bi-communal state where people vote along ethnic lines, and the two major parties are identified by the people as ethnic parties. They don't identify themselves as ethnic parties, but the people identify them as ethnic parties. Third parties, therefore, are very difficult in that environment. The United Force became a force in the 1960s by identifying itself as a capitalist party. and its base came from the Amerindians, which it was able to reach through the Catholic Church, and from middle-class Indians, and there were some middle-class blacks there. So it did not identify itself as an ethnic party as such, although its support came from Amerindians, an ethnic group. It identified itself ideologically. When the UF went off the scene, the WPA came on the scene. And the WPA was identified not so much for its ideological prowess, but its radical outlook. So young people of all ideological persuasion, some of them, you know, were right of center, some were left of, but they rallied around the WPA as a radical alternative. Because remember, the 70s and the 80s was the age of radicalism. That was the age of revolution. The Black Power revolution, later on the Grenadian, the Iranian revolution. So in an age of revolution, people rallied around the WPA as a radical alternative. The AFC, as the WPA waned, the AFC came to the fore as a third party that was heavily identified, not as an ideological party, not as a party that identifies with any race, but as a middle-class party that sets itself out as a quote-unquote democratic alternative to the other parties. So one would say, therefore, that the FC was not left-wing, is not left-wing. It more identifies with what it called liberal democracy. And as you know, liberal democracy is a European/American term that means right of center, right? So whatever that means, again, it's difficult to put an ideological label on the AFC, because I know people in the AFC who are progressive, who are left-wing. I also know people who are non-progressive and non-left-wing. You know, so it is that kind of thing. And if you go back to the original PPP, which was born in 1950, you had the Firebrands, the Jagans, and the Guyanas, then Sidney King, the Martin Carter. They were left-wing people. But Dr. Lachman Singh was not necessarily left-wing. You had people like Jainarayan Singh, who were not left-wing. So we have had these parties in Guyana that defy that kind of ideological label. So it's very difficult to label the AFC. But suffice to say that the three major third parties were the UF in the 1950s and the 1960s, the WPA in the 70s and the 80s, and as we enter the 21st century, the Alliance for Change. Third parties, their shelf life as vocal parties has been short-lived for all three, UF, WPA, and the AFC. I'll tell you something, Dr. Rose. Of all the new left parties in the English-speaking Caribbean that came into being in the 1960s and 70s, WPA is the only one standing. All the others are folded up. You know, all the others are folded up. It's almost a miracle that the WPA as a party from that era is the only one that still has some kind of presence in the society.
So, as I said, you're a student of politics. Folks, if you don't know, Dr. Hines is a professor of political science at the Arizona State University, and he's the host of Politics 101. What nights you broadcast?
Monday through Friday, and then I do a cricket program on Sunday night. So I'm on 6 nights per week.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes, I know.
You did a very good job in explaining that, and I hope you take time to explain that to the people on your Politics 101 program, of what you just described, the ideological concept of all the political parties in Guyana. That was very, very good. Now,
thank you.
The WPA has removed itself from APNU, but you said you all might rejoin. But why it pulled itself out from APNU?
Well, you know, it was in response to the leadership of APNU. Throughout the term in office of the coalition, we had been complaining that the leadership of APNU was treating APNU as PNC, and they were not giving respect to the smaller parties. They were not involving us in decision making. Decisions would be made at the government level, and we would learn about it in the media. There was no forum within APNU where the government leaders would come and say, here are some policies that we are planning to implement. What are your views? They never came to us with those. We learned of what they were doing. And so they were governing and making decisions in our names without involving us in decision making. And we had been protesting inside of the APNU to no avail. At one point, a commission of inquiry was set up to investigate our complaints. And it was a one-man commission headed by Robert Corbyn. And he presented the findings of his investigation. And the findings validated what we had been complaining of. It was found that even the PNC as a party were not consulted when decisions were made. After the government ended in 2020, the AFC made the same complaint. So we had a situation where we were a coalition, but the decision making was not democratic. And we had been complaining and complaining. And things came to a head after the election when the leader asked each party to submit nominations to go to Parliament. We submitted nominations to him. And we said, look, if you're giving us 2 seats, we want those two seats to be divided in 4, so that 1 seat, we will have one person do the first half, another person do the second half, the same thing for the second seat. We then said if there is 1 seat, well, then you give the first half to one person, Ali Majid, one of our members, and Tabitha Sarabo, another of our members, so that Ali Majid would serve the first half of the term, and Tabitha would serve the second half. And we submitted that to the leader. Lo and behold, the leader decided to choose Ms. Sarabo against our wishes. And so we said enough was enough, and we walked out. Because if you are saying this seat is our seat, we have to decide who we want to represent us and in what order. And
which leader you talking? Which leader you talking about?
Mr. Granger.
Okay.
And Mr. Granger decided that he would choose who our representative should be. And so we felt that we had been going through this impasse now for 5 years. And it's time that we pack up our traps and leave. And we left.
I'm having a number of questions, and I'm being pressured, but I can only ask so many questions of Dr. Hines. But I'll try to ask the very, very best questions. Dr. Hines, you just mentioned Tabitha Sarabo. Haley, I think is her last name.
Hallie.
Once someone asked, I don't know if it's a family member, would you all try to get her back to come into the WPA?
The WPA is open to anyone, and if the sister wants to rejoin the WPA, she can apply, and the WPA will consider it. Okay.
The other question I'll ask from our listeners here, you know, it's tough when you get all these questions, but I'm asking them to bear with me on this one. Someone is asking me, I'm not gonna call his name, that Indian voter turnout in Guyana is about 85 to 90%, which is accurate if you look at the polls from 1992 to now. But Black voter turnout has been just around 80%. How would the WPA, you as a presidential candidate, WPA, increase the black voter turnout in order to gain more seats in parliament?
I'm glad for that question, Dr. Rose, because it's something that we have been thinking a lot about, and I have been thinking a lot about. You're right. Voter turnout among our Indo-Guyanese brothers and sisters is higher, and it's lower among African Guyanese. And I am arguing, yes, I am arguing that it is not good strategy in 2025 to go after crossover vote from Indians, which is very difficult in this environment. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's very difficult because you have the PPP in office, and while the PPP is not enforcing while the PPP is not empowering poor Indians in the same way as it's empowering the elites among East Indians, it is still allowing some trickle down to get to the Indian Guyanese community. And so what it is doing, it is very cleverly barricading Indian Guyanese by implying to them that, look, we may not be doing as much as we should do for you, but we are doing more for you than we are doing for the other side. And so in those circumstances, it's very difficult to get Indian Guyanese to cross over and to vote for the coalition. Now, Indian Guyanese did so in 2011, they voted for the AFC. In 2015, they voted for the AFC. And I don't know about 2020 because the result, I don't know who won that election. And so I don't like to make definitive statements about that election. But Indian Guyanese voted for the AFC in 2011, 2000. All right? And those votes were mostly Nagamutu votes. Nagamutu brought over a small base with him when he joined the AFC. I think by 2020, Indian Guyanese were persuaded by the PPP to go back to that party. And they used things like the 7,000 workers, or how many, there is a dispute on the number, but they use that argument that, look, these people—
You're talking about displaced workers from Gaisuku, the closure of the four sugar estates.
Right. And they use that. And I think Indian Guyanese accepted that argument and they've returned to the PPP. I do not think that a critical mass of Indian Guyanese are about to repeat what they did in 2011 and 2015. And I think it's a rational decision. I am not one who say people who vote race are racist. I think people vote race because they see their racial interest tied up with that party. And so I cannot think of a forceful argument that we on the opposition side can make to Indian Guyanese to bring them over en masse to the opposition. I think some Indian Guyanese are already going to vote for the opposition. You know, those traditional members and supporters of the PNC. And
yeah, the PNC will get between 4 and 5% of Indian votes. People will get between 6 and 8% of black votes. That is since 1992. If you go back and look at all the election cycles since 92, that has been the results until today.
Yeah. So I am saying, I think a better strategy for the opposition is to try to raise the voter turnout among its base. I think they're more likely to get more seats from an increased voter turnout among its base than from crossover votes at this time. That could change as we go deeper into the 21st century. So for now. So I think that the disaffected voters among African Guyanese are mostly younger people. And I think that if we speak to those young people in a language that they understand, we could get them to come out to vote and increase the voter turnout among the support base. And in a 50-50 society, if you can bring your turnout up to the turnout of the PPP, then you stand a better chance of winning than if you go after the crossover vote and neglect your own base. So the WPA is saying, look, we think that we could speak to that section of the support base, the younger people, the disaffected voters, those who have been turned off from politics. There's some African Guyanese who were saying, the last time we were in power, we did nothing for them. That is not entirely true. But they do have a point that the government did not pay as much attention as they should have done to the African Guyanese. And let me say here, I think the AFC did not pay as much attention to the Indian votes that it brought across. So I think we were all guilty of not paying attention to the voters who voted for us. And so, therefore, we in the WPA are saying that those disaffected voters, whether they are tuned out from politics, whether they believe that they voted for us the last time and we didn't do anything for them, whether they are young people who have little or no interest in politics, we feel that that is a demographic that we can speak to and appeal to and try to widen the base of the opposition.
Dr. Hines, I have another question from our listeners here. Bear with me on this one. These people are bombarding my phone. They say that since you strongly believe that the young Black voters don't go out and vote as they're supposed to, what message would you drive home to them to get them to turn out as the presidential candidate for the WPA?
One is self-evident. Dr. Rose, the only policy around oil and gas that young people, old people, Black people, Indian people, Amerindian people have shown an interest in is cash transfer. And the WPA was the first party to put cash transfer on the agenda. There are young people now who didn't register. And because of this $100,000, they've gone out to register. It is the only issue that has captivated a wide cross-section of Guyanese, including young people. And what the cash transfer has shown is that once you initiate policies that speak to that demographic, they are going to respond. Look, there's a demographic that is left out of this 100,000 cash transfer that the WP has been speaking to in the last couple of weeks. And that is teenage parents. We have teenage parents, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds who have their families. They're teenage mothers and teenage fathers. They are left out from this 100,000. This 100,000 targets voters, meaning 18 years and over. And they've left out that important demographic, and it cuts across race. There are young Amerindian parents, young East Indian parents, young African parents. And those people have been callously left out by the PPP. The PPP is not interested in them. We in the WP are saying our cash transfer proposals will not target individuals over 18. We will target families. And so that young lady who's 16 years old with a child or two children, when we say families and household, she would be included. That young man who was fathered with his girlfriend, 17 years old, they're both 17 years old, they have two children, they're left out. And the WPA's proposal is saying, in our proposal, which will target families and households, they will not be left out. So the short answer to your question is that we have a proposal that has caught the imagination of all people, especially young people. I walk around Guyana when I visit there very often and do political work. And young people have come up to me to shake my hand for two things they usually shake my hand for. One, for what they say, standing up for Black people. And secondly, they shake my hand to say that your cash transfer proposal to give 10%, to take 10% of the oil resources, which we calculate would come up to somewhere around 5,000 US dollars, a million Guyana dollar. They feel that they are included in that. And so, yes, WPA feels that our proposal for cash transfer is one in which we can speak to the young people. Second, our emphasis on education as a means of getting our people out of poverty is directed at young people. Now, Dr. Rose, young people who go into secondary school at Form 1, by the time you get to Form 5 and they're ready to write exams, 50% of them have dropped out. It means that most of those who are dropped off are consigned to poverty. And WPA is saying our flagship campaign trajectory is to decrease and ultimately eradicate poverty from Guyana. And if we are talking about that, we have to begin with young people who are most vulnerable. So the tackling of poverty, the cash transfer, and education, bringing our people back into the education system, our young people. So you can be a young person who you leave school, you get pregnant at age 15. WPA is saying we are going to design an education system that brings you back into the system and allows you to reconvene, so not reconvene, but recontinue your education. One of the things we want to do is, for example, is to tie our cash transfer to parents sending their children to school. To say, look, you get the cash transfer, and one of the conditions for the renewal of your cash transfer, or part of it, is that you send your children to school, and we will be monitoring school attendance. Another is that you take your children to clinic for checkups and so forth. So we are tying cash transfer to education, to healthcare, and this is targeting young people who are the most vulnerable when it comes to poverty in Guyana. So we think that there are policies that we have that we can show the young people how they can get out of the cycle of poverty.
So the cash grant, so what you're saying to our listeners tonight, the WPA will offer $1 million as cash grants to the people of Guyana, including
we are saying that by law, we would want 10% of the revenues each year, 10% of the revenues each year to be distributed to each household. And Guyana has, based on the statistic coming out from the Bureau of Statistics, we have about 224,000 households.
No, it's more than that. It's about 310,000.
Well, we don't know about that because we have not seen the census. We are going on the last census, and there is 4.2 persons per household. In a population of 715,000, it comes up to 220 to 225 households. All right, and you can do the math. If our population size is 715,000, and if what the Bureau of Statistics and the World Bank are saying, that each household is about 4.2 persons, if you do the math, it is 224.
Yeah, but the World Bank also in that estimate said that there's some just single families in a household, and not 4.2. It could be just a couple, could be just three. So they said
4.2 is the average. 4.2 is the average, right? But we are not quibbling over that.
Okay.
Your question is whether it's 5,000. We are saying, given the oil reserves, Exxon is saying 11 billion barrels. The government is saying it's closer to 24 billion barrels. The WPA is saying that given all our research, we have about 30 billion barrels. So our calculation is based on the amount of oil that we are going to be pumping, the price of oil on the market, and when we take 10% of the proceeds, that's how we come to the $5,000 US, not per individual, per family, per household. So that's how. So people say 5,000. No, we are saying 10% of what we get, and 5,000 is a projection based on the oil reserves, based on the price of oil, and based on the number of households. Now, that can vary because if the price of oil goes down and you're not pumping as much oil, or the households increase as you are claiming, then that 5,000 could go down. So the issue here is not the 5,000, it's the 10% of the revenues.
So, but that will be a yearly thing or one-off?
Yes, yearly, not one-off. We are saying it must be enshrined in law, as it's done in most petrol states around the world.
Yeah,
the law must say that all Guyanese are entitled to a fraction of the oil revenues. And the government can then decide, how much each family is going to get. The law can say 10%. It can leave it open, but it must be enshrined in law, and it must be here, just like old age pension. Old age pension is a cash transfer, and it's done by law. And so we are saying this cash transfer must be done by law, and it must lead to what we call a universal basic income, so that all Guyanese families, regardless of their station in life, they would have a basic income coming in every year.
So you think that alone will bring the young people out to vote?
No, I'm not saying that alone. As I said, the young people, that is the only thing that has galvanized them. But that alone cannot bring them out. I mentioned education. I mentioned the reduction of poverty. I mentioned employment. I didn't mention employment, but we have to create employment. We have to train our young people in the modern economy and to create employment for them and give them a living wage. That is why we are saying a universal basic income, so that young people, in fact, all Guyanese, can get a basic income. Our young people are having a difficult time. They're compromising their dignity because of poverty, especially young women. Our young men are going astray. And we are saying we have to have a secure environment for our young people so that their country takes care of their security.
I have another question here. This is important because I would not have asked if it's not important. This listener is telling me that there are more than 5,000 homeless people in Guyana. Linden, Georgetown, New Amsterdam, Skellen, all the major cities. And he says, what would the AFC do to remove these homeless people in the city and put them in a home or something?
You mean what the WPA will do?
What the WPA will do, sorry.
And that is where cash transfers and a basic income.
But those homeless people don't have an address, so they won't be getting cash.
All right. We are getting into nitty-gritty here, right? We are saying that is why we have to ensure, if a man lives under a shed at the corner of Charlotte Street and South Road, that's his household. That is his household.
If he's sleeping in the street in Regent
That
Street.
is his household. If he's sleeping under zinc, That is his household.
But Dr. Hines, you go and give those people $5,000 US or $1 million Ghana dollars. What do you think they will do with it? You go and smoke more drugs, use more drugs, or what?
Dr. Rose, I don't even want to answer that question because I think that's a gross insult to our people. I think our people are much more sensible than that. Research has shown all over the world that when people are given these cash transfer, they spend it first on food. Secondly, they spend it on child care. Those are the two things. Third, they spend on education. This thing that people smoke and drink out, I think it's a myth. Of course, if people are mentally ill, you have to put them in an environment where they're treated and where their monies coming from the cash transfer is managed for them by the home that they're in or their families or what have you. But not because someone is mentally ill or homeless. It means that they should not receive the cash transfer and the benefits from our oil resources. They're human beings too. Of course, special arrangements will have to be made for them, but they must not be left out because they're homeless or because they're mentally ill.
Let me get this one question in before we go to a commercial break. And again, I'm not going to prepare questions anymore for this program because the listeners are bombarded me with questions here. I don't know if it's because of you or what, but it's happening every week now. They said that mental health is a major problem in Guyana. It's almost 40 to 50% for people who had some mental health problems. But it's saying 90% plus of the people in the streets who are homeless are mentally sick. What would the WPA do to help these people get over the mental health issues?
We have to treat mental health as a state of emergency in Guyana. We have reached that point. We have to treat it as a state of emergency. The WPA would transfer some of the funds that we're using to build hospitals and to spend some of those funds on treatment. We will train specialists in mental health. If you're dealing with a mental health issue, you have to have the personnel, the skilled personnel to deal with mental health. So we would spend money on training people who can deal with the mental health epidemic. We will spend some of the funds on treatment, and so it's about reprioritizing what this government is doing. This government is spending a lot of the money on health, on building hospitals. We are saying we're going to spend it on training, we're going to spend it on treatment, and we're going to spend some of it, not all of it, because you have to have infrastructure. Very importantly, spend it on increased wages and salary for healthcare workers. Our nurses and even our doctors are grossly underpaid. And so WPA will spend more money in raising the wages and salaries of our healthcare workers to the level that healthcare workers in the Caribbean are being paid. Bring them up to that level. Not only our healthcare workers, our teachers have to be paid, our public servants. We want to bring their salaries up to the level of their Caribbean counterparts. So treatment, training, increase wages and salaries will be part of our reprioritizing of how we spend money on healthcare. And so the mental health problem will be tackled as a special problem. We have mental health problems. We have problem with people, diabetes and hypertension. These are illnesses that we have taken for granted over the years. We have the capacity now, the financial capacity to deal with those areas. And those areas need specialists. And so we are going to spend money on, like I said, training specialists, on the modern treatment for these diseases. And we are going to pay our workers, our healthcare workers better salaries so that we can tackle those problems.
Folks, stay tuned. Don't go anyplace. I'll be back. Let me just get through these two commercials. All for one supplier. All for one. One is a number, supplier.com. You can go to that website and order your West Indian food, your groceries, your roti, your fish, your meat, and it will be delivered to your home directly and on time. You can use your EBT cards, your credit cards, your debit cards. All for one supplier is located in Queens, but deliver any part of the country. The number is 718-551-3292. 718-551-3292. All for one supplier. Now, Globespan. Most of us travel, but Globespan can solve all your traveling needs. They've been in business for over 30 years, and they can book your ticket to any part of the world. The Caribbean, Latin America, Asia, Africa, you name it, any part of the world. They have upcoming tours to Dubai, India, South Africa, and Norway. So make sure you get into those tours. There are special prices and so forth. They have offices in New York, Rosal and Val Park in Guyana, and Chaguanas in Trinidad and Tobago. The number to call is 718-845-0437. 718-845-0437. Globespan. Thank you. Dr. Hines, I don't know. I'm not going to prepare questions because I'm getting some very good questions for you here tonight.
That's all right.
This person is asking me, if the WPA should win 1 or 2 seats, would you leave your job as a professor and be a member of parliament? Yes. Or can you be a member of parliament if you can be if you're a U.S. citizen? So are you a U.S. citizen?
I'm not a U.S. citizen.
So they said, would you leave your job and be a member of parliament?
Yes.
Okay. So folks, that question has been answered yourself from Dr. Hines. Now let me get a chance to ask you a couple of questions I prepared. Now, you're the presidential candidate for the WPA. What is your party platform? What is your manifesto? Can you give us some insights into it?
Well, we are preparing our formal manifesto, but I've already given you some insights. We are running on poverty, on eradicating poverty. That is our flagship manifesto proposal. We feel that if we are able to solve the problem of poverty, eradicate poverty, then we open up possibilities for our country, we unlock possibilities for our country. If we get rid of poverty, we are going to be able to deal with education. We are going to be able to deal with health. We are going to be able to deal with employment, salaries and wages. We are going to be able to deal with entrepreneurship, which is a very important aspect. One of the things we want to do with young people, for young people, is that we want to bring more young people into entrepreneurship. That's the way the world is going. And a lot of our young people have brilliant ideas. Some of them have small little business. Dr. Rose, you go home very often, and you go in the villages, and young people are hustling something. They sell, everybody selling something, you know.
That's true.
I have a young friend the other day, she sent me a picture, you know. She said, I saved me money, I buy a pig. All right? I mean, and she built she pig pen. She got she pig. No, WPA is saying somebody like that, if they get a cash transfer of $1 million, and you have people, you know, small business experts who can work with somebody like that, she can take our $1,000 and buy more pigs and set up a business. And so it is not, everybody can be contractors, but there's some people, for example, you go to these funerals and they're young people, mostly women. They have these old refrigerators and they pack the beer and so on in there, and they sell the beer at these funerals and so on. Now, imagine if that person gets a cash transfer of $1 million. He or she is now able to buy a vehicle and to, buy a proper refrigerator and get now a mobile snacket, a mobile beer bar, and so on. And so what? Improve their businesses. So a lot of young people are already doing little business. But, my God, I watch some young women especially. They're at the corner, they're selling plantain chip, chicken foot, and so on. And you're wondering at the end of the day, how much do they make? It can't be much. But they're out there, rather than going and committing crimes or going and engage in deviant behavior, they are doing something. And we in the WP are saying, it is that demographic that we want to raise from the little street corner tray to a viable small business. And so therefore, we are going to direct the cash transfer to that. But more than that, we are going to make the small business association, the small business department work with those young people in our communities. Give them the necessary skill training, give them the necessary advice so that they can develop their small little tree into a viable small business. There are all kinds of markets that are available outside of Guyana for processed food and so forth. And we are saying that's an area that we want to pay attention to. The All Guyana Marketing Corporation under Burnham that was managed for us by my elder EUC Guyana, where GMC would give loans to people to buy the pig, buy the fowl, buy the chicken, buy whatever they need to buy to start their business. And as they produce, they sell to GMC, and they pay back their loans to GMC, and GMC help them to market their products. And so we want to go back to that model. Of course, we can't do it the same way it was done 50 years ago. All right? We have to do it in a way that is doing. Young people are doing tremendous work, but they do not have the capital, and in some cases, they don't have the market, and they don't have the skills. WPA intends to work with that demographic to develop an entrepreneurial class, not in one race group, but across all age groups. And that is why we are saying, look, our cash transfer proposal is to households, and each household, whether it's an Indian household, Amerindian household, African household, rich household, poor household, we give to all so that none will be left out. You see, when you target and you say, I'm giving cash transfers to people who are earning $100,000 less. Well, what happened to the person who's earning $102,000, $101,000, who's in the same, almost in the same bracket as the person with $100,000? So you give to all so that none would be left out. And of course, the rich people who won't have any use to the cash transfer because they're rich already, but they will have to pay taxes on the cash transfer. Poor people won't have to pay taxes on the cash transfer because for rich people it's added money and they would have to pay taxes. So that's an area we want to pay close attention to. Education is a goal. We are appalled at what education has become. Dr. Rose, you, as a little boy from Carrington, me, as a little boy from Buxton, you and I could be speaking to one another on this forum because of education. Because of education. And we were doing it at a time when it was a time of colonial education. Things were rough. We didn't have the money. Our parents made tremendous sacrifices. Now we have the resources. And we have to spend on education, not just the academic education to become lawyers and doctors and so on, but skills. Skills. What we on the old days called trade. We want to pay as much attention to that skill training education, and more importantly, to get our young people to become rounded. This whole thing of having children, 24 subject. Dr. Rose, you are a teacher. Any child who has to write 24 subject becomes a crammer. You cram in order to pass. We are not training our young people to become critical thinkers, because you can't write 20-something subject and be a critical thinker. So if WPA has anything to do, we would put a cap on the number of subjects young people could write, and to get them to engage in critical thinking, to get young people to engage in school, drama, sports, music, bring back all of those things into our schools, so that when our young people graduate from high school, they're fully rounded citizens, fully rounded. You and I, we benefited from sports and drama and music and gardening, and we did everything. And so when we left school, we were almost ready for the world. Our young people, get them up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They're gone to lesson at 6 o'clock. They left lesson at 8 o'clock, gone to school. They leave school at 3 o'clock, gone back to lesson. By the time they get home at 7 o'clock, they're tired. That is criminal, what we're doing to our young people. And so WPA is calling for a revolution. And if we have anything to do with education, we would have a revolution in the way our education system works. One of the things that I am thinking about is the abolishing of homework. Because a lot of the grade for school children now is homework. It's assumed they get computer at home. It's assumed that they get internet at home. Even if they have a computer, they get internet. It assumes they have all the things that have to do with a computerized world. And in many cases, they do not. That poor child in Brighton, in Kilturn, leaves school in the afternoon. That poor child in Enmore leaves school in the afternoon. He or she goes home. You got to go and sell, help your mother sell at the tray. You got to go and bring in the cow. You got to go and bring in the goat. You got to do chores. There is no time for homework. The rich child goes home. There is a maid. There is a tutor who's going to do their homework or help them with their homework. The average poor child goes home in the afternoon. The mother is either preparing to go and do watchman work at night, or she there at the car park waiting to catch minibus to get home. She comes home at 7. She's tired. She has to go and prepare dinner and she has no time to help that child with homework. So I am thinking about abolishing homework, or the alternative, to set up what we call homework centers in communities, where children, when they leave school, rather than go where they're not parents there, they go to a homework center where they're supervised. Not somebody doing the homework for them, but to supervise them. And the homework centers will be equipped with computers and all these things, and they are supervised to get the homework done. So those are alternatives to what we have now. Homework centers, or the abolishing or scaling down of homework, because that homework thing is apartheid. The people who benefit are the rich people children and not poor people children.
Okay, I have talking about education. It could be one of your friends. He says it to show a leader from a small community. He says the government said they will usually be free as of next year, January. I think that was announced by President Ali. But he said that his daughter went there and she graduated in 2021, and she owes close to millions of dollars in tuition fees. Would a WPA party, if it's in coalition with any party there, wipe out the loans owed by the students?
Yes. Loan forgiveness has to be part. It's okay to say tuition is free from January, but what about those who are saddled with all those loans? Loan forgiveness has to be part of this free education at the university level. And while I'm on that, Dr. Rose, you take interland communities. Look at the results, the low results that you get from those children in the interland communities. They do not have access to the same kind of education that people on the coastland have. They are not likely to go to university, because the people who are going to get into the universities are the people, the young people, the students who get 20 subjects and they're not able to go overseas. They're the ones, obviously, who would be admitted first to the university. The Amerindian child, the East Indian child, poor East Indian child, the poor African child that gets 6 or 7 subjects will not be able to compete with the people who got 24 subjects. And their likelihood of getting into the university is not going to be as high as those who get 20 and 24 subjects. And so therefore, they are not going to be immediately benefit from the free education university. WPA is therefore saying that, look, we should experiment with community colleges. We know that that community college is a phenomenon in the United States of America. And you know, Dr. Rose, that a lot of poor people children are able to spend 2 years at the community college, and then they go over. And you know what we have found is that when it's time to graduate, they do as well or even better than those who went in from the first year in the university. So WPA is saying, let us experiment with community colleges. If we have a community college in Al Charlton, a community college in Lethem, so that people, young people there, can go to that community college free of charge, get the first 2 years, and then transfer to UG, then we think that will help. That is, you're taking education into the communities, and you're catering for a lot of those first generation young people and giving them a chance to get into university. And you're home. You're not away from home. You're not having to deal with the stress of coming from Lethem and you're gone to Georgetown, you're going to UG, you're away from home. If you have a community college in Lethem, then it makes university education much more accessible. It makes it easier on the young people in those communities. So we would consider introducing community colleges, especially in the hinterland areas where our young people do not have access. And insofar as we do it on the coastland, is to give those young people who get 8 subjects and 9 subjects and 6 subjects a chance to get into university, because they are not going to be able to compete at UG with those with 24 subjects and so on.
All right, Brian, Michael just joined. I could carry the program up to 8:45.
I must apologize for not getting I must apologize for not getting on the program earlier. I had too much of video on my phone. I had to do some deleting of them. Too much of message coming in left, right, and center.
Okay,
And I
for that,
so next time,
we're going to carry for an extra 15 minutes to 8:45. We're supposed to end at 8:30 our time here in New York, which is 9:30 Guyana time. But for you, Michael, Mr. Carrington, we're going to carry the program for an extra 15 minutes. Tell us briefly, give us a brief background of yourself. I know you're a former MP of the Working People's AFC. You also the vice chair and so forth. Tell us about AFC quickly, briefly, because we have limited time now.
Yeah.
Policy election.
Yeah, you call my name Michael Carrington. I was born Bobishan in Kanji. A father of 12, 15 grandchildren. I was former Region 4 councillor before I, from 2006 to 2011, then member of parliament from 2015 to 2020. I joined the AFC when it's established for one particular reason, to prevent a winner-take-it-all government, because that was the message was preached by Mistress Holder and the two founder leader, Kemrat Ramjitan, and also Raphael Trotman.
Okay,
So my
okay.
focus,
Let me just interrupt you there. What do you
Yeah.
think is the role of third parties in Guyana? And Ms. Dr. Hines, you can come in on that after. It's only now I'm
Yeah.
trying to get to ask my questions. Audience, go ahead.
I really believe in third party. You badly need third party in this country here. Even if they win 1 or 2 seats, is very, very important. We had done well because we were the first party since 1964 actually to carry 6 seats in 2006. Won the seat, Mr. Hines ended up sitting down, Prime Minister Hines ended up sitting down in Linden. And then the next election, 2011, we ended up with 7 seats. Then 2015, we end up with 12 seats. You need third parties, not just in national election, also in the regional election. Third parties, people could form a team in, say, Region 6, Region 5, or any one of those areas, and contest regional elections if they don't have the resource to contest a national election. So there's a space to third party, and I think we, in general, Guyana should push third party to prevent that winner take it all. Because long as two parties participate in an election, you will always have a winner take it all. And since I was a little boy, what I'm seeing in Guyana is basically 2 races fighting to beat each other up when it's election time. Basically the Indian race and the African race, and we need to actually stop that. And the only way you could stop that is by having third party coming forward and take some of those seats to prevent that winner take it all government. So I have no problem with WPA or any other party running. And I think AFC should run, and whatever come out of it, let it come out of it.
So what you're saying then is that you want to see a minority government. Dr. Hines, what's your input on that? Be brief, because we only got about 20 minutes to go.
Yeah, I think the role of third parties in Guyana is to really do what the major parties are not able to do. The major parties, because they're electoral machineries, they pay less attention to policy. They tend to be pragmatic. They tend to compromise on principles. And I think the role of third parties is to raise the bar, to introduce policy ideas, to introduce political morality into the political process. So to push the major political parties to come out of that kind of opportunism that informs their behavior and to take progressive positions. So I think that is the major role of third parties. The shelf life of third parties is limited. Like I said, the United Force was there in the 1961 election, 1964 election. By 1968, they're gone. The WPA came in not as an electoral force, but as a protest movement. And it fought, I would say it led the fight for free and fair elections. It led the fight for democratization. But when democratization came, it became a victim of the democratization. And so it faded away. The AFC came in as people were losing confidence in the 2 major parties. And the AFC was able to say, not one or the other, but it went the pragmatic way, and it embraced one side, and it paid the penalty, because the Indian Guyanese who it brought over, who Nagamutu brought over, they, after 2 elections, they were pressured by the PPP, and they went back. So the AFC now has to rebuild. I don't know how successful they are. The WPA is trying to rebuild too. But the shelf life in these bicommunal societies for third parties is short. And so one of your role has to do that when you get a 6 seat, a 5 seat like the AFC got, you got to maximize it and do as much with it as quickly as possible, because your shelf life is going to run out very quickly, right? So these, I think, I am not too attracted to the minority government story, because a minority government really will behave like a majority government. We had a minority government 2011 to 2015, and the Ramatar government behaved as though it was a majority government. And it was only the threat of a no confidence vote that sent them back to the polls, because they control the presidency, they control the bureaucracy, and they're able still, although they don't control the National Assembly, remember, the executive branch is the strongest branch of government. So I am not swayed by the minority government. The minority government principle assumes that the two major parties are going to compromise. So you have a minority government and they say, boy, we don't have a majority, we're going to compromise. No, I do not think our political culture allows even a minority government to compromise. And so our experiment with a minority government in 2011, 2015 did not bring the kind of common sense and consensus that we were hoping for. And so I am not a big fan. I think that coalition is the way to go. And we should push coalition as third parties, but we should push the coalition to accept political morality and also to accept democratization and to put policies on the table and force them to embrace those policies.
Okay. Mr. Carrington, will your party collate with APNU?
I don't think at the present moment it's not on the table. By next year, when elections call, I think the party would make a decision, because then we have to call a national conference to decide on that. That particular issue has to be decided by a national conference, not by individuals.
Okay. Now, the next question I have for you. Your leader, Nigel, you said he will not renegotiate the oil contract. Where your party stands on that?
Not negotiating the contract. I personally, from my view, reading the contract with the 50% profit, 2% royalty, and the economic spin-off that I'm knowing that Guyana is actually benefiting from, a lot of economic spin-off through those subsidiary companies and all kind of thing, whether it's security guard, truck drivers, or whatever, persons dealing with food or whatever. There's not money just coming in from the 50% and the 2% royalty. There's other money coming in other areas. The problem I have is the auditing of the 75%, which put aside. I do not think that total money that put aside normally spent every year, and a portion of that money need to come to Guyana. But I think somehow or the other, they actually showing that the money is actually spent. So we have to deal with that. In terms of negotiating the contract, I think we need to look at it. I have no problem with ExxonMobil and the party sit down and look and see how Guyana could benefit far more than they benefited at the present moment. I'm made to understand from reading a lot of columns and all kind of thing that we get shaft. Guyana gets shaft. But most of the people, when they say Guyana gets shaft, they're not pointing exactly where the money is lost, where the money is going, how much Exxon is benefiting more than us. I know they're supposed to be having from the total like 12.5%, and we 14.5% in terms of the total oil that come out of the earth, which will show like if we having more, but I made to understand that they are having more than us. And I don't know on what type of calculation they are having more than us. But according to my understanding, is 50% profit and 2% royalty for us. And they is basically just 50% profit.
But quickly, your former Minister of Industry, Mr. Dominique Gaskin, will be part of the gold development project President Ali has in mind. But he said he has not left the AFC. But how the AFC members are feeling about that? What are the thoughts?
Well, I think AFC is a full democratic party. Please get some serious battle inside. If Dominic decides to stay and he have a job with the state, he's not having a job with the PPP, he's having a job with the state of Guyana in terms of pushing the jewelry industry in Guyana. I personally, this is my view, I personally don't have no problem with any person in any one of the political party working for the state. I have no problem with that.
Okay.
This is my personal view.
So, Dr. Hines, we spoke about the role of third parties, its importance. Do you think an all-together coalition will come together in the next election, the WPA, the Alliance for Change, and all these parties will join with APNU? And if so, who would you like to see become the presidential candidate? Norton or someone else?
Well, I'm hoping that we go in as a coalition. I think we stand the best chance of removing the PPP. And I think removal of the PPP has to be prime because the PPP is anti-democratic, anti-national. You heard Mr. Jack Dio saying on Thursday, WPA is setting a trap for him for a power-sharing government. The PPP is anti-power sharing. They are interested in a one-party government. And I think that is dangerous for our country. We have had 60 years of one-party government with a set of our people against each other. And so therefore, I think we have to remove the PPP from office in order to get the PPP to come into a national government. And so therefore, I would like to see, we in the WPA would like to see an all opposition party front, all opposition party coalition, fighting the election and winning the election, not as an end in itself, but as a means to an end. Now we have to learn from 2011, 2015, 2015, 2020. We won government and we treated it as an end in itself rather than a means to an end. But I still believe it's better to have many parties than one party. I still feel that it is the best chance of removing the PPP, let them cool out for a little bit while we bring back some normalcy back to the country. And so therefore, we would like to see the AFC, the WPA and the PNC/APNU come together in an all-opposition coalition. We are at present working as the joint opposition party on a specific issue, and that is the issue of GCOM with biometrics, a clean voters list, and an impartial GCOM. So we are working together over the last couple of weeks on that limited agenda. I am hoping that we can broaden the agenda to a full coalition. As it relates to who is the presidential candidate, we in the WPA say pick your team first and then pick your captain afterwards, right? And the parties will have to negotiate that. I think Nigel Hughes, Aubrey Norton, and if I may say David Hines, all of us are quite capable of being a good presidential candidate. So for me, the coalition will not lose anything with anybody. WPA, of course, is not going to be part of the running for the presidential candidate. We leave that to the other two parties. But both of the two gentlemen are capable presidential candidates and would make capable leaders of our country.
What an all-inclusive government means to you, Mr. Carrington? It means an all-inclusive government, the opposition, the two major parties join together with the other small parties and form the government?
I have no problem with that in terms of, for years now, we were talking about having a national government. I don't know how it would really work because of the cultural mentality of our people, especially the politician here. It's not easy to have cooperation or honest cooperation. Somebody always trying to run in front and somebody is always staying in the back, and then the war start left, right, and center. I would like to see a government who looking after the interests of the people. We had suffered for years, we go through some terrible hardship. And I think now that hardship needs to be go at the back and people must enjoy the blessings what we are reaping, whether it's from oil or any other resource, Guyanese need a break of that hardship. And to get it, we need people who love Guyana, not people who just wanted to be president or prime minister or what, and to hold big office and then be scrambling left, right, and center. I see some scrambling taking place right now. I don't know where we're going. Guyana, the mentality of the people had changed dramatically. And we have to find some way in cool down and working together. Now, we have a winner take it all government, which is the PPP. They would not go for a national government. They will continue to go for winner take it all. I think Nigel come on board was a very, very good thing for Guyana. I talked to him a long time, and even before he decided he will take up the mantle, he called me and I said, man, Nigel, let us go for it. Guyana really need good leaders. I admire you, the way how you work. You have charisma. A lot of people like you. We are on the ground there, and a lot of people wanted Nigel to move forward. As a matter of fact, they asked him for him to be the presidential candidate. Endless people across the country. And I don't know what will take place in terms of the negotiation between APNU, the WP, and any other small party. But I think he's a very, very good candidate. And I think if that time comes for a decision to be made, I think Mr. North, if they decided to have a coalition, Mr. North may give Nigel Hughes that chance.
Okay. Now, Dr. Hines, and this goes to you, Mr. Carrington. We have limited time. What are your party plans to address the high cost of living in Guyana, apart from giving cash grants?
Well, we feel. Okay, Michael, you go first.
No. That is a big problem right now. One of the biggest problem. For the last 4 years, I don't know what happened in Guyana. The costs for everything, beef moved from $400 a pound when APNU AFC were in government to $800 a pound. Chicken from $300 to about $500 a pound across the country. Every single thing, the price just keep going up. We are not going into what we call price control mechanism anymore, because they say Guyana is a free market. You can't go that way. But
So what is the solution?
The solution is basically production, producing more food in Guyana, so you could have large amount of food available, and so the price will drop. But we have another problem here. What I find in Guyana, if Tom selling for $500 and Dick Guap around here, Tom selling for $500, everybody selling for the same $500. Years ago, when I was a young man, somebody always trying to sell a little cheaper than the other individual to pull people to them, but it don't work so no more. You go all around Guyana, nearly all the places, the prices are the same price cost for nearly anything you go across. It might barely vary by just a couple cents, a couple dollars or whatever. So the thing is to have production, have people working. Because of the high cost of living, what is end up happening now, you have a large amount of job turnover in most of the workplace, because when somebody working with you and the money can't pay them to look after their family, then they leave that job and they go on somewhere else to work and disrupt that whole flow of that particular job. I had that problem since COVID-19. The cost of living went up so high that the wages that I paid did not look right to the staff anymore. They work for very good money, but it did not look right to them anymore. So they leave the work and look for a better paid job. My business was in such a way that I could not have had a higher cost on my goods, what I make or repair, so I could give the staff a higher wages, because when I add that high cost, I actually price myself completely out of the market. So we really got to get the people on the go in terms of producing chicken and beef, and the prices for food is just high. I don't know if it's because of the oil or what, but in our time, in APNU, AFC time, I remember one time the prices was going up. I think Jordan had to call in some of those business people and had discussion with them because people are putting up 100% waste call, other 100% from goods, 50% from goods. It never used to happen years ago.
Okay.
I don't know if Mr. Hines could remember. They had certain, you couldn't have passed, I think it was 33% markup on goods. But now people could buy something for $200 and they sell it for $400.
Dr.
And people
Hines?
are able to buy.
Yeah, you know, it's a complex. Sorry, it's a
Let me hear
complex.
you.
It's a complex problem, and I think Michael puts his fingers on the problem. Look, you know, there's a lot of price gouging that is going on. All right,
Yeah.
It's clear. But we live in a market economy. We live in a market economy, and so therefore prices are determined by the market. And the government can do two things. It can tackle the problem from giving incentives to producers, especially producers of food, because a lot of the price is food, so that they can reduce costs. So, you know, farm to market roads, fertilizers, etc., you can help to reduce the cost of production. Now, the person who's selling avocados, I don't want that person to deny that person raising an avocado from $300 to $500, because that's how that person is making their living and so on. So I don't want to deny them a right to earn more because they're working. So, but the government has to do something to ensure that those people spend less to produce their goods and transport their goods to market, etc. But the other end, where I think the government can help, and Michael hinted at this, is to raise the salaries and wages of workers. You see, when we talk about cost of living, is that when you go in the supermarket or go to the market, the money that you have can't buy what is being sold there. But if somebody is a rich person, and they get plenty money, they go to buy the same thing. The cost of living is not high for them because they can afford, they're earning money that can buy what's on the market. But for poor people, their wages and salaries are low. So we have to raise wages and salaries to give our people more spending power and to bring their wages and salary up to the prices of goods and services in the market. So it has to be tackled from both ends to help the producers, especially small producers, to produce at a lower cost by removing some of the irritants and also to raise the wages and salary of our people. There's no guarantee because there is always price gouging, but I think from a policy standpoint, those two areas way to go.
Yeah. One thing before, I know we just now you have to leave. The problem was noticed from since APN or any government was in power since the early days. Every time you raise wages by 10%, Guyanese don't want to deal with coins anymore. So they are adding 5% or 10% on that particular goods with ACN. They always add 20% or 40%. So if something was 100, the wages raised, you get $10 more, you get $110. That $100 for the person selling goods gone to 120. So they actually take more than which was given by any government. It happened all the time. I remember a couple mornings ago when that $100 coin came out and they tried to circulate it. I go in a bus and trying to give the man, the driver, the coin, the $100 coin. The man refused to take it. Said, "Man, you go free. I don't want no coins in my pocket." Just like that. So people are not adding a $10, a $5 on anything. Long as the wages raised by 10 or 50%, they add in 20, 40, or 60%.
Okay.
And
Guys,
that is a big problem.
Michael, I have to interrupt. We come again in the signal. We come to the end of the program. Dr. Hines, your closing remarks.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm sorry that Michael had problems because I was looking forward to our discussion. Michael is what I would call one of the salt of the earth political thinker. I've known him now for a couple of years, and I listen to him on the program, and I hope that we can get a chance to share this platform again. It is always important to give the so-called small parties an ear, an opportunity to speak at length about how they see our society and what they intend to do. So I would like to thank you and to thank Noir Singh and the listening audience, those who are sympathetic and those who are not sympathetic, for allowing us this opportunity to speak at length as a quote-unquote small parties. I hope I'm invited again. And this time Michael clears his phone early so that we can share the platform. And speedy recovery to Keon, who I was also looking forward to sharing the platform and as a young man.
Thank you. Michael, Mr. Carrington.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Rose, and thank the audience in terms of looking at us. Sorry I had missed the whole discussion, but I would like to call on our Guyanese people to develop a culture of removing government. All you have to do is your finger, this finger and your mind, and just develop the culture. Change government. Long as you see government messed up, don't keep them. Don't care how you say you love them, or you're born a PPP, or you're born a PNC, or whatever. Long as government messed up, you deal with them. And long as you change government on a regular basis, according to the performance, we will have a better country.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure having both of you, even though you're late, Mr. Carrington. Dr. Hines, you did an extremely good job tonight. Thanks to Noir Singh for making this program available, and to Devin Bissoon and Ron Gobin, our two technical directors here, and to our listeners, and most of all to our sponsors for making this program available. I thank each and every one of you tonight. But before I go, I want to encourage you to purchase my book. It's called A Race to the Finish Line: The Election of Barack Hussein Obama as the first Black President of the United States. Paperback, it's only $39.95. I think by the end of this month, hardcover will be coming out, and that will be over $200. So hurry up to get a copy of this right now. And it's a good read for everyone. Thank you all very much again. And thanks, guys, for being our guest here tonight. It's been a pleasure having both of you. Thank you very much.